Okay, so good evening to all of you, and a very warm welcome to this Thar Talk series, AI and Beyond. This talk series is organized by the School of Artificial Intelligence and Data Science, AIDE, in collaboration with Jodhpur City Knowledge and Innovation Foundation. The School of AIDE is a young school that aims to conduct world class research in both fundamental and applied areas of artificial intelligence and data science. Towards that goal, the school is proud to bring to you the ninth talk of the Third Talk series. Let me welcome the panel members for today's talk by briefly introducing them. We have with us Professor Shantanu Chaudhary, who is currently the director of IIT Jodhpur. He holds a BTech degree and a PhD degree from IIT Kharagpur. Professor Chaudhary is a fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineers and National Academy of Sciences. He is a fellow of International Association of Pattern Recognition. He was awarded the Indian National Science Academy Medal for Young Scientists in 1993. He has also received the ACCS CDAC Award for his research contributions. Professor Chaudhary has about 300 publications to his credit. Our next panelist is Professor Sampath Raj Vadera, who is currently serving as the head of Department Physics at IIT Jodhpur. With a PhD in physics from Janardhan Vyas University, he was formerly the director at Defense Lab of Defense and Defense Research and Development Organization. He has nearly 35 years of experience of translation R&D before he joined IIT Jodhpur. His areas of interest are in solid state physics, material science, nanoscience, and nanotechnology. We are also delighted to have Mr. Praveen Gupta on our panel today. He is a founding director of Premas since 2006 and has led the evolution of genomics space in India and built Premas genomics business from scratch to more than 250 crores. He holds a master's degree in genetics coupled with a management degree in PGCBM from XLRI Jamshedpur. Mr. Praveen has over 28 years of marketing experience in life science and molecular diagnostic arena, handling solutions for cell biology, proteomics, high throughput screening, and genomics. Our next panelist is Dr. Mithali Mukherjee, who is currently a professor in the Department of Bioscience and Bioengineering at IIT Jodhpur. She was formerly a chief scientist at the CSIR Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, Delhi. She did her PhD in bacterial molecular genetics from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and she works in the broad area of genomics and molecular medicine. We also have with us Dr. G.S. Toteja, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Jodhpur City Knowledge and Innovation Foundation that was established under the Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India, where IIT Jodhpur is the nodal agency. Dr. Toteja has served as Director, DMRC Jodhpur. He is a respected scientist and a renowned researcher, and he has led multiple teams holding key positions at ICMR. We also have Dr. Shankar Manoharan, who holds a PhD degree from Madurai Kamraj University. He is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Bioscience and Bioengineering at IIT Jodhpur. His areas of expertise include molecular biology, host microbe interaction, genomics, and metagenomics. I once again welcome all the panel members, and I invite Professor Mithali Mukherjee to introduce our speaker for the day. Over to you, Professor Mithali. Professor Mithali.
Okay. I'm sorry, I did not realize I was muted. So, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to invite Dr. Emily Leproust. I hope I pronounced your name properly. CEO and co-founder of Twist, today to deliver the Thar lecture series. And I would also like to invite Mr. Praveen Gupta, who is the MD of Premas Life Sciences, and they represent the Twist and Illumina in India And that's, I think, going to be one of the major areas. If we get into it, both of them are important. As we all know, we are now in the midst of a huge data deluge, which is likely to grow more exponentially. And India specifically is one of the biggest consumer of digital space. And also the world around is trying to find out ways as to how we are going to kind of handle as more and more data gets accumulated in all spaces, because it's become so pervasive. And I think we cannot now think about not living without data, right? And so in this context, now people have started looking for nature-inspired solutions. And one of the best way to store data, which nature has shown us, is the DNA, because that's the most compact way you can think about storing information, which does not mutate so much, which can be preserved for a long time. And it's also a universal language. So that way, if you are able to translate it into the DNA language, then that information can be decrypted or encrypted in many different ways. And it's also the ultimate compaction. So in Emily's lectures herself, she keeps on saying that maybe 20 gram of DNA can store the entire digital space in the world. So that's what theoretically, that's what is the possibility. And I think students might be very, very interested that a Netflix collaboration has happened with her group, where they decided to digitize a whole movie of the serial called Biohackers. And I think, Dr. Emily, we would like to mention that last Thar series was by Dr. Sarah Kinderdine. She works on the Digital Heritage Project, and she was also mentioning about you. And our participants were very keen to understand what went on in the Digital Heritage Project of the DNA. But more we will get to hear from her. But let me formally just mention her accomplishments. She's an early pioneer in the high throughput synthesis and sequencing of DNA. Dr. Leproust is disrupting markets to enable exponential growth of DNA-based applications, including chemicals, materials, diagnostics, therapeutics, food, and digital data storage. In 2020, Bio presented her with Rosalind Franklin Award for Leadership. Foreign Policy named her one of their 100 leading global thinkers, and Fast Company named her one of the most creative people in business. Prior to Twist Bioscience, she held escalating positions at Agilent Technologies, where she architected the successful SureSelect product line that lowered the cost of sequencing and elucidated mechanisms responsible for dozens of Mendelian diseases. She also developed the oligo library synthesis technology, where she initiated and led product and business development activities for the team. Dr. Leproust designed and developed multiple commercial synthesis platforms to streamline microarray manufacturing and fabrication. She serves on the board of directors of CM Life Sciences and is a co-founder of Petri, an accelerator for startups at the forefront of engineering and biology. Dr. Leproust has published over 30 peer-reviewed papers, many on applications of synthetic DNA, and is the author of numerous patents. She earned her PhD in organic chemistry from University of Houston and her MSc in industrial chemistry from Lyon School of Industrial Chemistry. So I think we are very excited to hear you, and after your lecture, we will have a round of question and answer session, which will be handled by my colleague, Dr. Shankar here. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you so much for the invitation and the introduction. I love talking about data storage, so it's a gift that you're giving me. I'll start by saying that Twist is a public company, so I have to say that I will give some forward-looking statement today. And I'll start with a quick overview of Twist. And at Twist, we are very excited because we think that DNA is changing the world for the better. And at just a quick view of who we are at Twist, we were founded in 2013. So we're still a startup. We are on the NASDAQ for about 2 years. We are a bit more than 500 employees, and we're based in South San Francisco, but we have offices in Singapore, in Tel Aviv, in Carlsbad, and we really want to be the most advanced DNA synthesis platform. And from that platform, we build businesses. And one of the businesses that we are building is in data storage. So I'll take a quick step back to talk very briefly an overview of Twist, and then we can focus on data storage. So here are some of the things, some of the applications that our customers are doing with our DNA at Twist. They are doing chemical, so they're doing sustainable production of chemical using synthetic biology and fermentation to make the same chemical that we use today, but using fermentation instead of oil. Our customers are modifying food to improve yield, lower the need for water, also lower the need for fertilizer. You can use bacteria to deliver nitrogen at the root of plants instead of using fertilizer. Of course, DNA is very useful in therapeutics to develop biological drugs. In diagnostics, our DNA is being used very widely. And then last but not least, an emerging application is data storage. So very broad type of application, very broad type of customers. And everything we do is based on the Twist platform. And so what the platform is showing here. So on the left, I'm showing how other companies make DNA. They use 96 well plates. It's for those of you that don't know, it's a piece of plastic the size of a big iPhone that are 96 wells, and you can make 96 pieces of DNA. And at Twist, we've developed a silicon chip that is the same size as a 96 plate. But instead of making 96 pieces of DNA, we make 1 million pieces of DNA, and those are called oligos. So we're not 10% better, we're not 10 times better, we want to be 10,000 times better. And those million oligos are conveniently grouped together into groups of 100. And then that means we can do molecular biology on those 100 oligos and assemble them into genes, turning them into guide RNA, making them into antibody. There's a lot of things we can do from there. And because we handle a million of oligos for many different customers at the same time, we have built a massive software architecture to know where the products are for each of the customers. Based on this platform, we've built a real business. So I know this is not an investor talk, but in the startup world in the US, you're not a real business until you're $100 million revenue. And so you can see our very fast growth at Twist. And this year in 2021, we told the world that we will be making $130 million of revenue. So it's real. It's a real business. So we have 4 parts to our business. I think I have 1 slide on each part, and then we can talk about data storage. So first, in synthetic biology. Synthetic biology will provide tools to our customers. And so you can go on our website and you can order a gene. You can order oligo pools, guide RNAs. You can get variant library for protein engineering. You can order even protein IgG antibodies if you're in pharma. So it's beautiful, frictionless, and intuitive on our website. And the way it works is very simple. You go on our website, you download the file of that has your sequence. We analyze them on the fly. If there's any problem, we tell you. There is an editor where you can go edit the sequences. You can do codon optimization, and then you choose your vector, and that's it. You get a quote, and then a few weeks later, you get your gene. So our motto is that friends don't let friends clone. The second business that we have is in genomics, and so in the area of NGS, which means next generation sequencing. I won't go into the details, but we support a number of applications. And my favorite, most exciting application is in liquid biopsy. And the idea there in liquid biopsy is that if you have cancer, you can wait and use optical method like a CT scan to see if you have a tumor, but that's takes a long time. That usually it's too late by then. But with liquid biopsy, you can take a blood draw, and you can detect at stage 1 or stage 2 if someone has cancer. So great tools to advance healthcare. The third business that we have is in drug discovery. And so we work with drug companies. They come in and they tell us their target, and we use our products to give them drugs. And so we are becoming a well-known drug discovery company. And here is some of the application that we've done with our partners. And you can see that we have programs with partners in very diverse areas like inflammation, immuno-oncology, cancer, I'm sorry, dermatology. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Dermatology, industrial enzyme. We even do drugs for cats and dogs. So with that, now I'll go into data storage. And data storage is the fourth business of Twist, and is a very important business for us. The challenge, the challenge and the opportunity that we have is that digital data is very hard actually to preserve. And here is an example of a picture that is more than 40 years old. And in the back, it's the Earth. Sorry, and in the front, it's the Moon. So this is a picture of the Earth rise, and NASA decided to go back to the tape to find to reread that data. And what happened is they had a hard time finding the tape. And then when they had the tape, they didn't have the machine to read the tape. But fortunately, one of the engineers that was retired had saved one of the machine, the readers, in his garage. So they got the machine back. And then they had to rewrite the software. And when they extracted the data from that tape that was 40 years old, what the result is frankly garbage. It's the quality is very low, and the data is degraded, and that is because magnetization goes away over time, and so there needs to be a better way to archive data for the long term, and DNA, we believe, is the solution. And you'll notice that I'm talking about archival, because our intent is not to replace a hard drive where you go in and out of your hard drive every few milliseconds. This is for data that is stored for the long term. And the good news is that archiving is 60% of the market of data storage. So talking about archiving, why is it hard actually to archive? What are the challenges in digital preservation? And so the first problem is that you need online and offline backups for long-term preservation. And as I mentioned in the previous picture, if you let the data sit for forever, the data gets degraded. And so what that means is that you need to constantly maintain the data and migrate the data from one tape to another, or from one hard drive to another. And so that's what happens. Even Amazon Glacier, they have to move. They have to move constantly their data from one tape to the next, and so those processes for moving the data again and again and again have system errors, have human errors opportunities, and it costs quite a lot. And so what that means is that we'll see that shortly. Every month that you're storing data, you need to spend more and more money. And then, last but not least, there are some data that are extremely precious, and we cannot afford to lose them. And therefore, what happens is that redundancies happen. So instead of putting data on one tape, you're putting on 5, 10, 20 tapes, and again, the cost keeps going up. And so there needs to be a better way. And the better way has been taught to us from nature. On the left side, I'm showing a few data storage media that were developed by humans. But you can find 20,000 years old mammoth DNA stored in the ground with bacteria, with fungi, and it's you can still sequence it. We have sequenced the Neanderthal genome from 40,000 years ago, and some researchers even found a tooth of a horse from 500,000 years ago that was sequenced. So DNA is extremely stable as a molecule, and we think that DNA could be the replacement for hard drive. So how does that work? The way it works is actually simple conceptually. The engineering need is the engineering behind it to make it work is difficult, but the concept is simple. If you have a file that is a bunch of zeros and ones, you can encode it into ACGT, and then you synthesize it on our silicon chip, and then you can store it. And we'll talk. I have a slide on the storage approach. And then if you need the data back, you can retrieve the file that you want. So you don't have to sequence the entire internet to get your file back. You can, using PCR, you can individually pick files, and then you can sequence it on any sequencer. And once you get the ACGT back, you can decode back into the zeros and ones. So conceptually, it's simple. And this approach provides a number of benefits. So the first benefit is that it's sustainable. As you may know, data storage, data centers are huge users of energy. For instance, there is an estimate that Facebook alone is using 2% of the electrical grid in Texas. And so a lot of energy is being used to store data. But with DNA, it's very tiny. You don't need to, you need the power of a light bulb to keep it forever. So you could store the entire internet with the power of a light bulb once it's made. It's extremely durable. It's basically permanent at room temperature, and you don't need that's the big saving of DNA, is that you don't need to constantly move it from one hard drive to the next. You don't need to constantly move it from one piece of DNA to the next. Once you've done it, you're done, it's stable forever. And the next advantage is what we call TCO, which means the total cost of ownership. I have a slide coming up on the comparison between hard drive and tape, but the cost of storing on tape or hard drive keeps going up again because you have to constantly migrate it. The media itself is universal. That's a great benefit. Because I don't know you, but I still have a VHS tape at home, but I don't have a VHS reader, and that's the problem with storage media in general, is that you don't have a reader 5, 10, 20 years later. Whereas with DNA, we will always be able to read DNA. DNA is so important to human health that there's another reason to maintain DNA readers. And then last but not least, the density is obtained with DNA is just huge. And as mentioned previously, you can store 10 zettabyte in a shoebox. So it's absolutely it's the densest media that there is. So exploring a little bit more the benefits. So first, starting with density. Here we're trying to represent that when we are doing the synthesis on silicon, we're able to put 1 terabyte of data in a 500 micron dot. So as you can see, it's super dense, and it would be the equivalent of having 1,000 hard drive on a business card. And so hopefully it gives you a sense of the density that's possible. If you put all the DNA together, you could get even more density, but you need to be able to retrieve it. So we think that putting DNA together in 1 terabyte increment will enable you to retrieve the data without having to sequence too much. Yeah, it's true, you can put all the internet in a shoebox again, but it's better to have some physical separation of increments of data such that you can more easily sequence them. So density is the first benefit. Next, let's talk about total cost of ownership. So this is the cost of preserving a movie, for instance. So for instance, we work with Netflix. And if you're creating a single episode of a high-end TV program, for instance, for Netflix, if you want to, and so that usually creates 100 terabyte. The series itself, the final 1 hour is not that much, but shooting all the scenes, all the data that is created that Netflix and other companies want to keep is 100 terabyte per episode. If you store it on tape, what happens here on the right, we compare either Glacier, which is Amazon, or on-premise on tape. What happens is that you have to pay a little the first month, but then every month you have to pay, and so over 100 years, it's a $1.2 million to store 1 episode for 100 years. And so it's obviously not sustainable. And right now, companies that have stored data in the past, they are deciding what are they not going to keep because it's just way too expensive. And the benefit of DNA is that the cost is flat because you pay once and you're done. And so there's not that increment of adding cost month after month after month. And so depending on whether the Twist DNA will be at 100 terabyte, at $100 per terabyte, $50 per terabyte, or $25 per terabyte, you'll see that we'll break even with long-term storage, either in 10 years, 5 years, or we may be even breaking even on year one. So and really, so this is the ultimate driver in our world. Ultimately, it's always the economics that drive things, and the reason why people will switch to data storage in DNA is frankly because of that total cost of ownership. A couple quick discussion around the hard drive. So how is the DNA stored? And so there are multiple options, but right now we are looking quite deeply at a company called Imagine, and what they do is they are one of the leader in storing the DNA, because at Twist we make the DNA, but then you have to store it. And so their solution is to use a stainless steel capsule that is lined with glass, and the DNA is put in the tube, and the oxygen and the water is removed, and then the tube is sealed with laser, and they've done accelerated studies where they put the capsule in an oven, and they cooked the DNA for years, and they showed that the DNA is stable at more than 100,000 years, and there's no maintenance, and so that type of hard drive will ensure that the data lasts for a very long time. And then last, in terms of how it works, this is the concept of how we think things will work. Well, basically, we will be a in the cloud solution, data in, data out. And so the customer that has data will upload their sequence in the cloud. The data will be transformed into ACGT in our machine, and we will make a physical sample of DNA. That DNA will be stored in some tube or in some format that is stable for a long time. Either Twist keeps that piece of DNA, or the customer gets it. We are open to both. And then when the customer needs the data back, we will sequence that DNA, or the customer will be able to take that DNA and sequence it somewhere else. It does not have to be sequenced at Twist. We will provide an open format. So where are we in doing this? And so when we started Twist, on our silicon chip, we had a feature size of 50 micron. And so all the business I've talked to you about SynBio, NGS, and drug discovery, that's made on 50 micron on silicon chip. We've shown last year that we shrank this to 5 micron. Now we're working on the 1 micron CMOS chip. That's our proof of concept. And the goal is to go all the way down to 150 nanometer. And when we get to 150 nanometer, we will have prices that are compatible or that are competitive against hard drive and tape. So before we get there, in the next few quarters, we'll have an alpha chip, and we will actually sell data storage from our CMOS alpha chip. That is at the miniaturized density on silicon. A few examples of why it works. We heard during the introduction about Netflix. So we did work with Netflix. They store their stories biohackers in DNA. I'm glad that some people on the line participated in that project. And it was a great success. We've also worked with the United Nations and UNICEF. We work with the Montreal Jazz Festival. We work with Microsoft and the University of Washington. There's articles and videos that you can look. But basically, we've done dozens and dozens of projects, and it always works. So we are very confident in the need for data storage, and we're confident that it works. Right now, we only, quote unquote, only have to achieve the price target that we set for ourselves. And again, that's the miniaturization of silicon. We also are working with, we're forming an industry alliance. And so Twist, Microsoft, Illumina, and Western Digital, we were the founding members, but a lot of people are joining. And the idea of the alliance is to educate our future customers. So it's to generate an industry roadmap, develop use cases, and educate future customers such that by the time we launch our product, everybody in the industry is ready to do pilots and has the budget to do the evaluation. So with that, I'll stop here. Hopefully that generated some thoughts for questions. And I want to thank you very much for, again, the invitation, for the attention, and I'll be delighted to entertain discussions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leproust, for that fascinating talk. We'd like to start off the Q&A session by inviting our panelists for their comments and questions, if any. So, Professor Chaudhary, would you like to say something? Do you have any questions? Over to you, sir.
I really don't have any question as such. I think it was a very interesting technology which was talked about, and just kind of a projection that what is the time frame you see that when we shall possibly start using a DNA storage on our laptops, mobile phones, etc.
No, that's a great question. Thank you. I think having DNA on a laptop or a phone, I think that will be a long time because you need to integrate the sequencing and the reading and the reading and the writing on the phone. Yeah. However, I think having a phone connected to a cloud where the storage happens in the cloud in DNA, I think that is very soon. I think we're just a few years away from you being able to say, you know what, all my pictures on my phone that are so precious, press a button and a week later you get a tube of DNA with all your pictures on your phone, and that's your archive. And you can store that archive at home. And if you lose your phone, you lose your account, you can always sequence back those pictures. That's going to be I think that will happen very soon. There are multiple market segments. One is with direct consumer. There's also a segment of enterprise, and then there's a segment of government. I think government will be the first to adopt it, then enterprise, and then consumer will be last. But having your device connected to the cloud, I think that will be very, very soon.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Chaudhary. If any of the other panelists have any queries.
So, yes, Emily, that was a nice talk. Lots of questions I see in the chat box, but quick question. What are the challenges? This is a very new area, and there are lots of engineering students here. And what are the challenges in the computational domain, meaning uh, uh, data compaction, even if you convert it into a DNA, do you think there's a scope still for looking at nature's how they compact the DNA? Could you have the information also layered not just by AGCT but also some combinatorial which will give you even better compaction and lesser cost for DNA synthesis? Do you see that as a future
Yeah.
advancement?
No, definitely. Right now, there's a race to see uh, uh, how much data can be encoded per piece of DNA. So the DNA that we make is 200 bases, and so there's a race of how many bytes is that. And so some algorithms are able to only get 1 byte per 200 base pair of DNA. We are able to encode 20 bytes per oligos. But yeah, there's an opportunity. If you could increase that 20 byte to 40, 50, 100, that will decrease significantly the cost of storage. And so actually, there is, if I go back a few slides back, there's quite a bit of work that is being done in what's called the codec. And so it's here. It's the encoding, and how you choose the encoding of the data can have a big impact.
Thank you. Praveen, is there Praveen up before we go to the
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Mitali. Emily, that's a great talk. I mean, we are partners, but we are talking to each other for the first time. It's a pleasure. Couple of questions. One, I mean, actually, kind of building up on Dr. Mitali's talk. I mean, are we thinking of adding further complexity from a quaternary structure to maybe adding a methylation kind of a change and getting more complexity in data storage on the DNA? I mean, have you tried this?
Yeah, so we have a paper with a university in Israel where we blended some bases. So we had an A base, a C base, a G base, and a T base, so 4 bases. And then we added a mixture of AT and a mixture of CG. And so when you read back, if you see CG, you know that it's different from. So basically, we went to a 6-color printing scheme, and that increases the density. There is some thought about adding non-natural bases to increase the alphabet. Frankly, at Twist, we're a little bit resistant to that idea because we think that a key benefit of DNA is that it needs to be read universally 50 years, 100 years from now. And if we go to non-natural bases, we're going to need some spatial readers. And I think that you lose one important feature of the DNA, which is that is universal. And so we're a little bit resistant to using non-natural bases, but we do like the idea of having mixtures that increases the number of letters, increases your alphabet, and therefore increases the density of encoding.
Yeah. Thanks. My second question is more on a commercial side, Emily. I mean, in your experience, what do you think for developing countries like India? What would be that, inflection point at which we can actually adopt DNA storage, and which all areas do you think would be the primary areas of DNA storage as the first adoption areas? Is it going to be medical records as people predict? Is it something else as per your, kind of forecast?
Yes, I think my prediction is that the very first customers will be governments, because governments have big data sets and they have a huge need to keep it. And then after that, it will be very precious data that companies have. And in all our travels and discussions, the media company actually have a huge need. Anybody who creates content, either visual content, audio content, they don't want to lose that data, and so they're probably the next customers. After that, there's a huge need in finance and insurance to keep data for a long term. After that, healthcare, like you mentioned. After that, oil exploration. So I don't know if there's a lot of that in India, but oil exploration actually generate a lot of data. And then they need to go back for 40, 50, 60 years as they are pumping oil. They have to go back to that seismic data. Um, After that, there's also a huge need in astronomy. Astronomy, it's basically taking movies of the sky all the time, and so that generates also a massive amount of data. And then after that, all the Internet of Things instrument, for instance. There's a huge explosion in cameras for securities to capture, to make sure that your properties are secure. Those cameras generate a lot of data all day long. And then last but not least, social media also generates a lot of data. So I think there's an explosion of data, and that data does not need to get access all the time. I think it's okay to archive it, and I think that's what we see from a commercial point of view.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. That makes sense. Thanks.
Shankar, go ahead. Hello, Shankar.
There are a lot of questions in the chat box, so I'm trying to distill a few very interesting questions. So the first one that I want to ask is, what about errors during reading and writing? How do we deal with those? And do you use any artificial intelligence and machine learning models for analysis and making sure that the data that you get, store, and retrieve are accurate?
Yeah, so that was a huge concern of ours, and in the encoding, you have to be very careful that you have a redundancy of data, and so what we found in all of our experiments with all the groups we work with is that it's 100% perfect. And you achieve 100% perfection in a couple ways. The first way is when you encode the data, you can use multiple oligos that have the same data. And so on average, each byte is stored on 4 different oligos. So even if you lose 3 of them, you still, as long as you have 1 out of 4, you get your full data back. So that's quite that's very robust. And then the second is when you make one oligo, it's not a single molecule. You actually make millions of copies of the same oligo. And so same thing, if some of the oligos get destroyed, it's not a single molecule. You have a lot of redundancy in the material. And so in all our experience, we found that's 100% accuracy, and frankly, it has to be. So that's what we're shooting for. And DNA is great at that because you can get many levels of redundancy with DNA.
Good. The other question that I had was you spoke about writing data into DNA. What are the technologies that are available today that you think will transform reading the data back?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so at Twist, we don't do reading. And so we're assuming that the reading technology does not improve. So if the technology never improves on the reading side, current technology works. And we've tried them all. We've tried Illumina, we've tried Oxford Nanopore, we've tried PacBio. But what I think will happen is as technology improves, the cost of sequencing is going to keep coming down. And so what that means is that right now it's affordable to store data that you will read maybe once a year. But in the future, as the cost of sequencing comes down, you may be able to read it once every 6 months or once a month if needed. And then sequencing is going to increase in speed, and so it's going to get faster and faster to read. But the bottom line is that even if the sequencing technology don't improve, we're fine. But as they improve, they'll make the cost of reading and the speed of reading even better.
Thank you. The next most popular question appears to be one of privacy and data security, because we're going to store a lot of data in a very small amount. So how can we address the issues of privacy and security?
Yeah, and so the data can be encoded. So you can your data can be password protected, like a hard drive. You have to be careful because 20 years from now you need to remember your password to get your data. And so you have to be thoughtful about whether you want it password protected or not. But the same encoding or the same encryption that you can do with a hard drive, you can do the same with DNA. And then the second benefit of DNA is that it's actually very, very small. And so if you wanted and when we talk to companies, a big protection from loss, so basically people trying to steal your data, is you have to kind of hide your data, and it's a lot easier to hide DNA than it is to hide a hard drive. For instance, again, a shoebox, it's all the internet, so you could very easily have a very high amount of data hidden in a small amount of space. So from a privacy point of view, I think it's very similar to a hard drive, but because DNA is more dense, you have some more options around hiding the physical material.
Okay. There's our students have questions on building a startup in this domain. So what are some challenges that you faced in building up Twist?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge at Twist, it's all about getting that price down. We've done demonstration, it works. So now it's all about lowering the cost. And so it's a pure engineering effort of going from 50 micron to 10 micron, sorry, from 50 to 5 to 1, and then to 150 nanometer. And we're doing well, but we're still a few years away. But it's engineering challenge of having electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, chemists, biologists, all software engineers, all working together to miniaturize that chemistry as low as possible.
Thank you. Another biological question. So we see that when there are long stretches of homopolymers, the read and write efficiencies are pretty bad. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right. If you have 5 or no, if you have 10 A's in a row, or 20 G's in a row, it's very hard to write and it's very hard to read. And so actually that is all part of the codex. That's all part of the encoding, where you want to encode the data and get DNA sequences that are easy to synthesize and easy to sequence. And so the codec that we use and the codec that others are developing remove all those homopolymers. And so you don't basically you have to be very careful in your encoding to make sure that you don't create sequences that have hairpin or homopolymers or repeats, or basically that would be hard to read or write. And so that's why the codex is quite important.
Thank you. Another question that came up quite frequently is the read-write latencies at present and how you expect them to change over time.
Yeah, no, you're right that on the tape, it's about minutes. On a hard drive, it's millisecond. On flash is nanosecond in terms of latency. DNA will be slow. DNA will be hours. It will be hours to write. It will be hours to read. And so that's why we're going after the archiving market. We're not going initially for the hot data that's in and out all the time. We're going for the archiving market. And so, for instance, Netflix, they don't want to use DNA for the streaming part, but they want to use DNA for the archiving part of all the files that were collected during the shooting of the movie. And that archiving is 60% of the market.
That's great. So what do you think are the possibilities of rewriting or editing data that's already been put into a, let's say, archive?
Yeah, I think that that's one feature that we don't talk a lot about DNA, but it's truly write once. So, for instance, when companies do clinical trials for drugs, by law they have to store the data for 100 years, and so they have to prove that the data was not tampered with. And so when data move from one hard drive to the next, from one tape to the next over the years, they have to prove that there is nobody came in to change the data, and that's hard because you can rewrite a hard drive file, you can rewrite a tape file. Whereas with DNA, it's write once, you're done. You cannot really, even with there's no way to edit the data, and so it's another great feature that you're guaranteed that there's been no editing. It's the original data.
Thank you. So another question is, you mentioned that you worked with Microsoft and other large stakeholders in the data storage area. Would you like to mention something about the Purple Drive that they've developed?
So you're thinking about the what Microsoft is doing in terms of the writing
platform. Yes.
Yeah. So Microsoft they've done a demonstration that they put together an instrument that it's really data in, data out. It's kind of like a server. The idea is you put a file in, it will encode, it will write the DNA, it will store it, and then when needed, it will read it back, and so it's one piece that does everything. And so it's a very advanced, neat demonstration. Personally, from a commercial point of view, I don't think this is the direction we are going. I don't think we need to have things integrated. I think the writing and the reading, I think it's better if it's separated, because it's never going to happen at the same time on the same machine. So personally, from a commercial point of view, our vision is to have the writing and the reading separate. It's we'll see who's right ultimately.
Thank you. So I see one more question from the audience. So have you considered storing DNA data in DNA in living organisms? For example, the question is about radiation-resistant microorganisms, which can repair any damage through correction mechanisms. So is Twist working in this direction?
Yeah, we don't think we'll need it, because again, when we make DNA, it's not just one single molecule. If it was a single molecule, yes, you need to be worried about radiation, and you may need DNA repair and so on. But because we have so much redundancy of DNA, even though it's very dense, there are millions of molecules for each sequence that we haven't seen the need for that at this point. And so never say never, but and maybe that when we go commercial scale, we'll see that, but at this point we haven't seen a need for that yet.
Great. So the last question for the day is what are some futuristic code encoding that we can think of in the long run to make this technology commercially viable in the long run?
Coding and coding. That is a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, you're stumping me here. Yeah, you're stumping me. But maybe one thing that long term, the next things that needs to be developed after this. So once you have storage, it's good. But I think the next frontier after that, and if I was a student, I would be very interested in that, is around computation, because now you have data, you have lots of data, and if you can do computation, that's going to be even more powerful. And there's different levels of computation. So doing a copying is easy, right? On DNA, because it's just a PCR. It's 1 hour, $1, and you make copies of zettabyte. I think whereas doing a copy of zettabyte is very hard on a hard drive or tape, and so computation. So copying is solved. Search is a big need. So for instance, now I have all the data. Can you search all the files that have a picture of a cat, right? That's hard. And then if you do computation around, can you do Fourier transform on all the astronomical data that has been collected? So if you use the combination of enzyme and DNA, and you can compute I think you will drastically improve the value of large amount of data that are being stored. I think that could be the next futuristic big frontier.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Leproust, for the fascinating talk and for patiently taking all the questions. I now invite Dr. G.S. Tateja to please do the honors. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a wonderful talk, and it has a lot of implications in years to come. As you mentioned that, you see, the practical use of this technology has limitation because of economic aspects. So it is estimated that in another 10 years, the cost of synthesis of DNA will go down to $1 per terabyte. And so we expect the cost of sequencing also will go down. On behalf of Jodhpur City Knowledge and Innovation Foundation and Indian Institute of Technology, Jodhpur, kindly accept, we present you a small token of appreciation. Kindly accept this memento. And also, when you get opportunity, then visit our country also. It's a beautiful country and wonderful people here. Thank you very much.